Next is page 92. So we're talking about the 12 tribes and the blessing that Yaakov gives his sons. And he says about Asher that on a simple level will be an abundance of oil. And the way he expresses the blessing is that he will dip his foot in oil. So he's explaining the spiritual significance of that. In addition, he's explaining the spiritual significance of the tribe of Dan, who marched at the rear, because they were in the same encampment. In other words, I'll actually kind of a photocopy of it, easy for you to visually see. But when the Jews encamped in the desert, it worked like this. In the center was the Mishkan, right? Around it was the Levites encamped, Moishe Rabbeinu and the tribe of Levi. And the rest of the 12 tribes, so they encamped in 4 groups of 3. Yeah, in 4 groups of 3 around the Mishkan. So if you can just visualize this for a second. So you're facing north. Actually, we should be out there facing south, traveling south. Just you don't remember it, but you get the idea. So in the rear, behind the Mishkan, is Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Significant because we're talking about the tribe of Asher now, that's blessed with oil, and he's in the tribe of Dan.
It would be in the south side.
The rear, the back, depending which direction they're traveling, but in the back.
All the lost things.
Done.
Picked up all the lost things.
Yeah, we're getting to that. So we're just telling you. So identifying the tribes. So Dan, Asher, Naphtali is one group. The east was Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun, dominated by Yehuda. The west was Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin, dominated by Ephraim. And the north was Reuven, Shimon, Gad, dominated by Reuven. And that's how it was called, the camp of Reuven, the camp of Ephraim, the camp of Dan, the camp of Yehuda. So what's significant is that Asher and his oil and the feet in the oil is together in the camp of Dan. So to understand the spiritual significance of all of this, as Yossi just mentioned, the tribe of Dan marched at the rear at the very end, and they were ma'asif l'chol ha'machanos. They restored any lost objects to anybody that had lost it, because they're traveling in the rear. So anything that was dropped or left behind as they camped and put things together, things would happen. They would find it and restore it to their owner.
Question.
Dan. Dan is the very rear. Now Asher is in that camp. That's its significance. Asher as well as Naphtali are in that camp.
I have a question.
On this, okay?
Yeah. So when they carried Yaakov's body to bury,
They carried him with the same formation.
same formation. So so when they camped, when they traveled, they would have traveled in the exact same.
There's 2 opinions. There's traveling.
Well, I mean, they had to travel to get there.
Who is they?
Well,
What are you talking about? Are you talking about Jacob? Are you talking about in the desert?
when they brought Yaakov's body to.
Yeah, so they carried him the same formation on their shoulders. They carried him like
The same as
they were encamped in the desert.
Okay.
But I'm pointing out is that when they traveled in the desert, the tribes, there's 2 opinions whether or not they traveled in the same square formation
Okay,
or a long line
okay.
behind each other. Camp 1, 2, 3, 4. Either way, either opinion, Dan was the very rear. Either way,
Both opinion, okay, so.
either going as a square or as a column, Dan was at the rear. So why? And so he was called the one who restored. That was the function, that which is lost. So we learned the deeper meaning of that. The quote of our sages is that they restored all that was lost. what is it? What is lust? We're talking now spiritually. What is that we lose? So the Talmud says, in defining the fool, the halachic fool, it's very significant in halacha to know if someone is capable or not, whether his actions count, whether they can be appointed as an emissary. There's all tremendous halachic ramifications. A person has to be of sound mind for his actions to be considered established. So what's the definition of a fool? So the Gemara says the definition of a fool is hama'abed ma she'noisnim. He loses what is given to him. If he can't hold on to something, simple meaning, a person that cannot hold on to possessions, so it doesn't have that wherewithal, that kind of maturity, that's the halachic fool. Nothing to do with IQ, but it's just a certain ability to be able to function. If you don't mind, pick it up and hit the number 6. The ability to be able to function with a modicum of responsibility, of maturity. And there's a story I'm trying to remember, I think it's with the Tzemach Tzedek, just as an aside, to illustrate the story. The problem of the fool becomes very acute in the case where a husband has to give a get to his wife because the marriage is intolerable. If it's a fool, a halachic fool, he can't do it. He has to give it with sound mind. So she's stuck. So the case was that he when she married him, he was intelligent. The opposite of a fool, a pikech, means developed. But then he became a descendant, and now she needed a get. Can he give the get or not? So it was a big discussion. So everybody's trying to find a way to he's become an imbecile, a fool. So Tzemach Tzedek, I think it was, calls him over and gives him, whatever was it, a ruble, and says, go to the store and buy such and such a thing for me, please, and bring me change. So that's what he did. He went, he bought it, came back with the change. Tzemach Tzedek said he is fit to give a get. Didn't lose the change. He was able to have it and responsibly bring it back. So on the basis of this halacha, that's how you tested him. And so all was fine. He was able to give the get and she was released. I'm almost sure that I'm getting the players right, but that's the gist of the story. But that's physically, that's halachic. Now spiritually, now explaining this spiritually. So what does it mean spiritually to lose what is given to him? So the key word is the word ma. Ezel Shaita, who is a fool, hama'abed, who loses. Ma, that or what is given to him. Now this word ma is a very significant word. The word ma, Chassidus explains, represents humility. As in, Moishe Rabbeinu said when the Jews complained, the complaint was about the meat or the food, you want meat. He said, "V'nachnu ma, what are we that you direct your complaints to us? We're nothing. What are we?" Chachma is also is 2 words. Koyach ma, which is the faculty of humility. Ma. What do you mean by humility? What's it got to do with I mean, Chachma is the first stage of the intellectual process. What's humility got to do with it? The answer is a lot. Number one, the person, if he's going to want to gain knowledge, the first step has to be humble. Because if I know, then there's no room for anything else to get into your head. So a person has to empty himself and approach every subject with complete humility. Only then will he be a vessel to receive it. So that's why Chachma, Bina, Das, Chachma is the first stage in the intellectual process in acquiring knowledge. The person himself has to be humble. Also, implied in the word ma, which means what? The inquisitiveness, the nature of intelligence is to inquire and trying to understand what is the subject matter, what is this, whatever it is that we're referring to. And again, in order to be able to truly understand what it is, one has to be completely open and humble and receptive. Moreover, since we're on the subject, when learning a new concept or discovering a new concept, struggling with the concept, and then when you get this epiphany, oh, I got it. That at that point, the concept itself is in a state of profound humility. What I mean by that, at that stage itself, the concept is just a seed, just a flash. You have no words yet. Now, the light bulb goes on for a millisecond, and the idea is it's a kernel. It's all there, this intense moment. Now you need to develop it in stage 2. That's Bina. Chachma is, I got it, but if someone disturbs you there, you lose it. It's like being in an unfamiliar dark room, and for a second light goes on and off, and you've got it all. It's all there. You got the picture. But then you got to rethink it and reconstruct it in your mind because it was only there for this flash of insight. Like the comic books have it, a light bulb goes on. Or the penny drops, as the expression is. That's just a moment of, I got it. I'm talking about profound ideas. So here too, what I'm telling you is that the idea itself in its initial stage is undeveloped. It's also why it's called Ma. Ma means it's there, but what is it? We don't have language yet. That's why it's called Chochma, Koyach Ma. The idea, I know I've got it, I've seen it, but Ma, it defies at this point language or words because I have not reconstructed it and rethought it in my mind and developed it, which is Bina. You following all this? It's male and female in the creation of development of an idea. The male is the seed and the female develops. Chachma is male, Bina is female. All to say, so now I hope we have arrived at this conclusion, that the word Ma, which is part of the word Chachma, which means what? What means, there's no definition, present but not definable. That's the ultimate humility. There but no titles. Moishe Rabbeinu, the symbol of humility. Ma, what are we? He says that you are nothing.
But that
pardon? I'm just going to finish the idea. So, who is the fool who loses the Ma? Granted to everyone is this humility to God. Where is it? It's in the depth of the soul. The depth of the soul is ego-less. That's the Ma. The Ma, the what? Meaning to say present, but not assertive. Complete humility, like seed, all the various symbolism that we gave. So this is granted everybody. Who is the fool who loses it? Who loses this, not in touch with, let me rephrase that, not in touch with the core of the soul, which is humble, and gets lost in ego and in self, etc. That's the real fool. So the Hasidic definition of the fool has nothing to do with intelligence, and IQ can be a genius, brilliant, and you can be president of a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, can be a professor. If the person is arrogant, he's a fool. He loses the Ma. He's caught up in his own. He's impressed with himself and caught up with his own sense of self. To whatever degree, to that degree, he's a fool. And that's what the definition of a fool is. Now, the deeper meaning of this whole thing, now on a very spiritual level, Ezel Shaita, who is the fool? Hama'abed, who loses the Ma quality, the humble quality, the godly quality that it was given to him at birth, or even before birth, by God in his soul. Okay, hit the pause button. Now your question.
So the idea that the seed is planted by man in the ground.
It's a metaphor, yeah.
Right. So the seed is planted in one's head by Hashem. Hashem plants the seed.
No. We're talking about the person is trying to understand something, and he discovers he Everything comes from God. That's not the point here. Everything does. We're talking here about a model of the intellectual process. You're learning a piece of Talmud and you're struggling over it. You're reading the words and the English and the commentary, you're not getting it. And all of a sudden, boom, something clicks. That's what we're talking about. That's one example of what. So we said that the idea there is seminal. It's not developed. The person himself is also, I'm going to add another detail to this. In order to discover the truth in the first place, has to approach it with complete openness. Others will never get anything new. He'll always be stuck with just the same old. And furthermore, there's another point is, I'm adding something else here. In that moment when the light goes on, I got it, the person himself is in the ultimate state of humility, meaning he's completely in awe of the idea. It's the truth that goes on, and he's just the complete silence. All of his faculties are just in silence, receiving this. He's in a truly humble state in that moment of epiphany. I don't mean humble now in the moral sense. We're talking in the intellectual process sense.
So if he's a keli, an empty vessel to receive, does that apply here as well?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. But I'm trying to say something else. That in that moment when the idea illuminates, it floods the person, and he then is transfixed in that moment of the truth shining, of the idea illuminating. Very few people ever have this experience. That's what it sounds related. It's big discoveries, big ideas that a person that were beyond him initially that he's grasped now, and that they're transformative. But at any rate, what I'm saying is, to some degree, we all experience it, to some degree. I'm saying that this idea of bittul, the self-effacement, nullification, is the state of the person when that discovery happens. He is completely transfixed as the idea illuminates his entire mind. Stage 2, when he starts to develop it and use his language and break it down, then the self kicks in. That's bina. That's the self kicking in. But the chachma state is a complete state of, like, literally, what happens to the person, he's oblivious to his surroundings. If you saw such a thing or experienced it, that moment of you get it, completely oblivious, you could touch him, it won't even feel you. Because the idea, this discovery is completely overwhelmed his entire being. So the entire being is sublimated in a state of bittul to the truth that he has discovered. In that moment, oblivious to anything else.
Like a scientist or inventor.
The inventors, the great inventors experience this. They're very creative people. And at that moment, they're in a different world. You talk to them and I hear you. At that moment of the discovery. Why? Because he's completely nullified to the truth that has completely occupied his mind. An analogy for that. Chassidus explains that the two faculties of seeing and physical hearing, are the same. How so? Because when you see something, what happens? What is sight? You're sitting here and I see you. Why is that? Well, to use a better example, makes it clearer. I have a camera. There's a mountain over there. How did the image of the mountain get on my camera? Same question. How was you're sitting there and I'm here and I'm seeing you? The answer is light travels. Light travels, bounces off the camera, the mountain, you, and then enters in the screen. The screen gets the impression. The mind through the eye, and the impression, the image that the light faithfully transmits is interpreted and recreated in my mind, and that's why I see.
It's physical.
Physical. It's a physical example. So what am I saying? So Chachma is called seeing. Why? Because when you see, you're entirely passive. The truth of what is just impression itself upon you. The camera, the eye, is a passive instrument that when light travels, it will convey what's going on out there. Whatever is going to come in, nothing to do with me. My sight of it, I am passive. That's bittul. There's no interpretation. I'm not creating this image. I'm just open to receive it. The image comes to me. So that's why Chachma is called seeing. Again, the light bulb, seeing the light. Because from a very deep place, actually, in the soul, this idea has welled up, as it were, and just flooded the brain. I see it, epiphany. So it's like sight. I'm saying sight is if on a physical level, it's the same idea. That's why Chacham is called sight. Because when you see something, you are entirely passive. It's the truth of the image of what is that is impressioned upon, as opposed to listening. Just like Bina. When you're listening to me now, you're not passive. Seeing me, you're passive. You don't have to work at seeing me. Open your eye, you see the image. But to understand what I'm saying, you are engaging in this process. You're hearing one word and another word, and you're piecing the idea together. Hopefully you're getting what I'm trying to convey. That's no easy task. Take ideas, put them in words, shoot them out, listens, decode the words, put them together, string them together, get the idea. It's a whole. You're doing this very quickly, but it's a very active process. That's Bina. That's analogous to Bina. Like the idea has flooded. Now, the self now takes apart the idea, word by word, and that's the self already. So Bina is the engagement of the self in the idea, in processing the idea. That's when you take ownership, it becomes personal, so you're going to be your language. But the Chachma moment, you're completely out of the picture. The self is out of the picture. The truth has illuminated, like seeing. Seeing, you're passive. The truth of what that image is going to be in you're going to see. It has nothing to do with you. You can't control that. You follow? So that's another analogy. It's a physical manifestation of a spiritual. So what I'm actually saying is I've given you three models. Physical sight and hearing, then intellectual sight and intellectual hearing, Chachma Bina. That's all still part of the human condition. And that's all a model for the spiritual, divine Chachma Bina. What's the divine Chachma? So three levels: physical, sight, hearing, intellectual process, as we just described, the epiphany, the development. Chachma is a two-word definition. Chachma is the discovery of the idea, Bina is the development of the idea. Still talking on the physical plane, not tangible, but the world of ideas. But that's level 2. Level 3 we're talking now is the spiritual, the origin of all of this. The origin of the Chachma Bina here, which is the origin of the Chachma seeing, hearing here. The origin is spiritual Chachma. What's spiritual Chachma? Spiritual Chachma now is the level of the soul that sees God, and therefore completely nullified and surrendered to Him. And that's a gift that God has given every person at the core of our neshama that sees God. And because at that level the soul sees God, it's super conscious, but it's present. At that level, the soul is completely nullified to, humble to, dedicated to, etc. Clear? So, yeah. So who's the fool now on a deeper level? And that's called Ma. All these three levels, the word Ma applies, as we explained. Ma means what? Undefined. Ma is the objective search for truth, inquiry for truth, even if it's going to hurt, if it's going to be uncomfortable. The truth is the truth. It's all part of Ma, the question. Always asking if I'm going to get an answer that I don't like. So, but that's the truth, that's the truth. So it's also part of this humility property. Again, Moishe said, what are we? Using that word Ma, that's the critical word, which is in the word Chachma, Koach Ma, the faculty of humility. Clear? To whatever degree we have some understanding, right? So back to our subject at hand. So who is The fool who loses the ma. That's the spiritual fool. He can be intellectually brilliant of everything in the world, but he's a fool if he's arrogant. If he's not in touch with the ma, the deep part of his soul that sees God and is nullified to God. So who is the truly wise person? Not a question of knowledge or IQ. The opposite. The truly wise, opposite of the fool, is the one who is in touch with his soul, the depth of his soul, where there the soul sees God, is nullified to God, and that he allows to suffuse and embrace all of his consciousness. His consciousness is all suffused by this core humility. Now, getting back to our subject at hand, first of all, the tribe of Dan. So the tribe of Dan, what did they do? They restored that which people lost. So now we understand spiritually what this means. We have to understand why. We'll soon get to the why. But Dan, that's a huge paradox. They march at the rear, which on one level means they're the lowest of all the tribes. And they are the ones that everybody looks to for inspiration. They restore, put people back in, align all the other tribes with the core spark of the divine, which is the essence of their soul, from where humility springs. Dan provides that. And the answer is, why Dan? Because he marches at the rear. Why does he march at the rear? Because he's not the big intellectual, relatively speaking, to the other tribes. He's the simplest of the tribes. It's the simple Jew that we look to for that inspiration, for the true wisdom, the true virtue. It's the simple Jew who serves God wholeheartedly and simply and unsophisticatedly, and not based on because I understand, but based on, for the simple Jews, because you said so. It's not obscured by a lot of intellectual and reasoning and rationale, which could distract the scholar because he gets caught up in that world of rationale and forgets where it all comes from. It's all divine and it's all at the core super rationale because it comes from Hashem. That's the danger for the scholar, to forget that. It becomes intellectual pursuit. It's intellectual gymnastics. Talmud is very, very, very complex and then challenging and intellectual, profoundly so, inexhaustibly so. And he can forget that it's divine, it's his holiness. The simple Jew never forgets that because of his simplicity. He approaches everything with direct line to God, as it were. So the tribe of Dan is the one that restores what everybody could lose. We're kind of clear now?
Rabbi.
1 second, first Scott, and then Alan, yes?
So I'm trying to, in my head, if we're walking down the street in a snowstorm and you're first and I'm last, and I'm following in everyone else's footsteps, you've created a path for me.
We're not talking about a snowstorm.
No, I know, but I'm just.
We're not talking about creating a path.
But if Dan is coming last,
It's coming last because on a spiritual level,
it's following in everyone's footsteps.
it's not so much,
following
it's the emphasis here is not following in their footsteps. The emphasis here is that the tribes above Dan all are greater scholars and they have more developed emotion. They're more sophisticated. Now, in some level, it is true that they're following in the footsteps because the scholars are the ones that know Torah and they can say what we need to do. But with all of that, they have the danger of arrogance. They have the danger of losing that humility, which the one who marches in the rear, which means the least sophisticated Jew, he's got it. That's what we mean. Is that clear?
Somewhat.
If you have a question, ask.
No, that's my question is if they're spiritually they're coming in the rear. We're talking physical and spiritually
Yeah.
they're.
We explained the spiritual significance of this, yeah?
Yeah, so they're following spiritually they're following,
Yeah.
and they're there to pick up what's lost.
So what is lost is humility. That could be lost, and that's what they're restoring. That's what we're talking about.
Not restoring their own humility, restoring humility.
They have it because they naturally have it because of their simplicity and their devotion. They're the foot soldier. It's a simple Jew who, his whole life is humble. He does it because not because he understands, not because he's motivated by profound logic and reason and philosophy. He does Shabbos and puts on film. And simple fella, simple man or woman because God said so. He's got it. He lives it. He's the embodiment of that humility, and he restores that to the scholars that could lose it and often do.
Okay.
All right, that's what we're saying. Yes, Alan.
I just can't, I don't think a fool is the right term to use if somebody doesn't grasp something. Because I remember when
Someone doesn't grasp something,
when you can't get the idea through.
that's not what we're saying. We're saying that the fool is the one who loses the humble essence of the soul, not in touch with that essence of the soul, which sees God. That's what the fool means. A fool means someone who's arrogant. That's the Hasidic definition, period. Now we explained that this level of the soul that sees God, that's the highest level of ma. That manifests into the intellectual process, ma, as we explained, chachma, and that manifests in the faculty of sight. There's three levels. We're talking now the highest level that every Jew possesses, and it's the simple Jew who's in touch with that much more so than the scholar.
Right. Okay.
This was one of the great revolutions of Hasidus, that of the Baal Shem Tov, that was a cause of a lot of resistance. One of the reasons, this is one of the many reasons that the Hasidic movement was opposed and vehemently opposed, is because the religious establishment saw that he was making fundamental changes in Judaism. This is not Yiddishkeit. And one of them was that the respect that to be accorded to the scholar. The scholar is the highest on the totem pole. In those days, friends, in Eastern Europe, for a number of reasons, but there were shuls, different shuls. The scholars had their shul, and then there was the shul for the cobbler and for the tailor. They didn't daven in the same shul. And so life, when the Baal Shem Tov came along in Eastern Europe, there was a big disparity between the elite scholars and the masses of Jews that were illiterate. The reason, for economic reasons, a lot of that had to do with that, and pogroms and so on, and great poverty and decimation. There was a great divide between the scholars and the masses. Typically, a scholar in those days, then at that time, a simple Jew wouldn't dare say good Shabbos to a scholar. Wouldn't even dare to say good Shabbos. And if he did, the scholar wouldn't hear him, but wouldn't respond. So, what are you saying good Shabbos to me? Who are you? That's how it was. Scholarship.
That's arrogance.
Yeah, scholarship was revered, and this is all based on the sources in the Talmud. The Torah study is the greatest of all. We say this every morning, right? Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, every morning in our morning prayers. So along comes the Baal Shem Tov, and he says that the big scholar has to learn from the simple Jew. It's exactly what we're talking about here. That with his arrogance, he's a fool with all of his scholarship, a spiritual fool. And he's far from Hashem. And the one that's really close is the simple, humble Jew. He's got the real connection. And Halavai, the Baal Shem Tov taught, and that's the struggle of the scholar, is to have the simple faith and humility of the simple Jew. That's your real work. Revolution. What? They felt that he's undermining the whole hierarchy, the whole respect accorded to scholars. That was one of the reasons for the opposition.
So we still have that till today. And let's say in Parshat, go into the Haredi community in Utramal,
Not much less than it did.
But still on that
Listen,
same idea.
we don't sit in judgment. I'm telling you, it's not so.
I'm not judging.
It may look that way. It may look that way.
I think it's class.
It may look that way superficially, but if a person goes there without the preconceived notions of who they are, you'll see that you'll be welcomed. I'm telling you, things have changed. Things have changed, even in the most extreme.
Rabbi, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
It looks that way. You're right. I was very involved with them for 27 years, and their humility is contagious. In fact, when you really get to know them,
Yeah.
their humility is contagious.
Not only that, yeah, that's very, very true. But I'm saying even the acceptance of the non-religious Jew, etc., which was always a very big barrier, and that's changing now. The whole Haredi world is changing and opening. And let's not get sidetracked. So we got to, we have to relax a little bit in terms of the way we tend to naturally box others. We're a little bit closer. Yeah, we judge less, and you'll see, hey, they're not so. But what I'm talking about is 250 years ago, when it was that way. And really, that was the way it was. And this is the big revolution that the Baal Shem Tov brought about. What we're talking about right here, the virtue of the simple Jew, that the scholar needs to halavai. Halavai. I'm reminded of a story when President Zalman Shazar came to the Rebbe, the first president of, not the first president, was he the first president or the second? He was the first president of the state of Israel, yeah. So this Zalman Shazar, his name is Shazar Shnei Zalman Rabinsky. He actually comes from the Lubavitch background. Shnei Zalman, he's named after the Alter Rebbe. And he's one of the great founding fathers, as it were, of the state of Israel, etc. Anyway, a long story. He was always always observant and so on, but he obviously wasn't a card-carrying Lubavitch chassid, but he always identified with Chabad, that tremendous correspondence with the Rebbe. And then in 1967, he came to New York and he wanted to visit the Rebbe. This is a whole brouhaha. Many were against it, not so that he's going to visit, but he's a head of state. The Rebbe should go visit him. That's what people felt in the Knesset, and that you're going to visit. You don't visit anybody. You're the president of the state of Israel. Can people come and visit you? To which he said, "I'm going like a chassid to the Rebbe. He's my Rebbe. I'm going as a chassid. I have the right." He went in his beautiful pictures of it, and he was there for Purim, and he was there in private audience. And in the beginning, the press was there, and then they had spent many hours in discussion. So part of it, which is recorded and filmed, is at that time, that's when the Yemenite Jewry was starting to emigrate in larger numbers to Israel. Now, Yemen was, like it's a third world country. So he didn't say this to the Rebbe, but this is what he was kind of referring to. So they'd never seen the modern world and the modern technology. Thank you. So just to give you an idea, so they put them first in camps, and there's many stories within stories. Not a very pretty story, the whole thing. Just to give you an idea that they never saw a toilet before. They thought it was a drinking bowl. What would you think otherwise? A nice container, this water, fantastic. Just to give you an idea. So he said, Shazar says to the Rebbe, they just were coming down to Israel then. He was speaking in Yiddish, and he used the expression, as in Yiddish, a proster, which means simple folk, but not in a virtuous sense. The Rebbe corrected him and used this word pshitus, which is another Hebrew word for simple that implies transcendence, purity. He was using a word that implied, lesser, and that just unsophisticated and the word really is implying not unsophisticated. No, the word, a person comes from uncultured, and not cultured, uncultured, tarbut, uncultured, not sophisticated. That's the word he used. No, the backward kind of, backward. Never corrected him with a smile and changed the word and said, no. Pshitus. A simplicity, a beautiful simplicity that we need to aspire to. So this is something we're talking about over here. This is the big part of the big revelation of Hasidus that has transformed the Jewish world. So that's the deeper meaning of the tribe of Dan. So Dan marches at the rear. He's not the scholar. Not the scholar, not the author, he's a simple Jew. That's why in the totem pole he comes at the end. But he's the one that restores that which is lost. Everybody could be lost to everybody else. And what's that? Ma. And what's that? That's the humility, the simplicity, the essence of the soul, which is egoless and humble and simple. That's the scholar can lose that. And the simple Jew restores it. He's the one to look for, to be inspired in the example. Now this, I'm already running out of time. So no, this is all to explain. We're in the middle of the tribe of Asher. The tribe of Asher, which is oil produces oil, literally, physically, that huge amounts of olive trees, tremendous, beautiful olives. Asher marches together with the tribe of Dan. And how does Yaakov bless Asher? That he will dip his foot in oil. Simple meaning, in those days people walked largely, it's not barefoot, but with sandals, and it's hot, and the heel becomes hard and cracked. So people do that, would dip their foot in oil to keep the foot, and you have so much, so it's a luxury to use for you. It's a luxury to put your foot in the oil. Oil is used for food, for illumination purposes. Simple meaning, you'll have so much oil that it'll be excess. People will be able to use it just to dip their heels in oil. The deeper meaning is, quickly, oil represents intelligence. Oil produces light. Oil floats atop of all liquids. Like intelligence is the highest faculty of a person, which is why the head is on top. Yeah. The foot is the opposite. The foot's the opposite, yeah. So Asher represents the head because he's oil. They were great scholars, and they were enlightened. They produced light. They discovered all the beautiful things.
An abundance of spirituality.
Huh?
An abundance of spirituality.
What kind of spirituality? Intellectual spirituality. That's what oil represents, is intellectual spirituality. That's not enough, because that could be arrogant. He's got to dip it in, his foot in it. What's the foot? The foot is the lowest part of the body, symbolic the tribe of Dan, which is why he's in that encampment, that his scholarship should be suffused with humility. Bring the element of humility to your learning, to your scholarship. And who are you learning from? Dan, which is why you're in the camp of Dan. Dan was the simple Jew. He is your inspiration, that in your scholarship and learning, you learn like a simple Jew does, with a sense of awe and humility, and it's not a question of ego and being right, and I know it, but about Hashem and the truth. So we now have the symbolism here. He'll dip his oil, he'll put his heel in the oil, meaning, this is God, Jacob's blessing. You're the big scholars, don't become arrogant. Scholarship founded based on profound humility. That's the foot. The foot is the humble part of me. It doesn't have any sophistication. It's the heel, the lowest part. That's the tribe of Dan. That's your neighbor that you're marching with. You learn from them. And you bring, the ultimate therefore is for you a humble scholar. Not easy to be a humble scholar. To have all this knowledge and scholarship and be a leader in it and be humble, that's what it's all about. And you learn that from the tribe of Dan. And symbolically, therefore, your oil Your foot is dipped, is humility. The foot does what it's told. It walks on the ground. It's symbolic again of the very real, the lowest level. It is the lowest level. That you fuse with the oil with your head. We're clear? That's so far that's what we said, and God will continue. No, I may not be. No, I'm not here next week, God willing. So we will.
So my question,
Yeah. Everybody have a Shavua Tov. Thanks for joining.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Thank you.
Shavua Tov, Sarot Tovat, and thank you all for coming and for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shavua Tov. Is it over?
Thanks, Rabbi.
Shabbat Tov. Thank you.